Have you ever left an event feeling fulfilled and just overall this feeling like you were satisfied and you didn't want to leave? Well, that was my experience at the Seeking Whole Health Conference this past weekend, and I want to tell you a little bit about it. So for the Cultivating Calmness podcast today, we're going to talk about this conference that I went to and how it was. I've been to 2 conferences in the last 2 weeks now, and of the 2, and really of all of the ones that I've really ever been to, I feel like this is the one I walked away from feeling energized, feeling fulfilled, feeling like I just didn't want to leave. I wanted to spend more time there. I wanted to tell everybody I knew about it. And, I can't wait to go back to it next year or, other similar conferences. Now, yeah, I'm a counselor. This was a conference that was not counseling related at its foundation. It wasn't meant for counselors. It was meant for anybody. There were practitioners there. There were, moms, dads, grandparents. There were, just regular people there to attend a conference to learn about whole health. And this conference in particular, it is Christian and Bible based, and so a lot of the presenters base some of their presentations on where we come from and what potentially the Bible says about healing and health and diet and life and things of that nature. But that wasn't the primary focus as far as what we were learning. What we were learning was like our bodies, our whole health, how to take care of our bodies and how we were meant to be living and how we were meant to be caring for ourselves. And I took away so much information from that session, those sessions from this weekend. And, it's taken, it's only been a few days and I'm still processing and trying to formulate and arrange some of my thoughts on it. And, I am able to take a lot of information from that, not only just personally, but also professionally. So I went for 2 reasons. I went to build my foundation for why I practice functional mental health so I can bring that information back to the people that I work with and for really all my clients. And then also for me personally, I learned a lot of things about myself, about my family members, where I'm hearing stuff and going, we should probably look into that and we should probably do something about that. But I also was thinking about my clients in the same way, like, when they talk about this thing or that thing, when my clients are talking about anxiety, how much of their anxiety could be related to blood sugar problems? How much of their anxiety could be related to how they're breathing at night or how they're breathing during the day? And these are things that we don't really think about in relation to our health, I think in general, but also especially when it comes to the counseling field, we're not considering all those root causes. We ask about your stress, we ask about your anxiety, your depression, your PTSD, all those things, and like where some of those things maybe they're coming from, right? Well, you're sleeping a lot. Well, maybe you're not eating, this way or that way. Maybe you're not exercising, those events that happened to you. Yes, those were really traumatic. And that's, those are probably the likely source of that trauma. So yes, we do address those things, but oftentimes, in my experience, just from being a counselor now for over 13 years, and 15 if you include all of my training in counseling, that wasn't the focus, right? The focus is more symptom driven. Somebody comes into your office, and this is counseling. This is Western medicine, any medical doctor, you come in with your symptoms. This and this and this and this is what I'm feeling, thinking, behaving. And we as providers would and do give a diagnosis to label all of those symptoms into a certain category. But our health is more than that. Our health is more than a diagnosis. Our health is all of the things that have come together to cause each of those symptoms to begin with. And that's why I really loved this conference. And I brought my handy dandy notepad. I use this notepad to take notes with my clients, but I also use this notepad when I go to conferences. And um, I brought it here to talk today just because I didn't want to miss anything. I will be doing some, little shorts and things over the next coming weeks, sharing some of this information that I learned. I took lots of pictures. I'm hoping that maybe I can reach out to some of the presenters and get some of their slides. Not like a counseling conference where they kind of send them out to you and you potentially have them for the actual conference. It wasn't that kind of conference. So, I may or may not get the slides. So I was taking pictures. I was taken lots of notes, several pages of notes here from the different sessions that I went to. A really nicely put together program that had all of the different topics, the different times, the agenda per se, and then descriptions of all of the sessions that were going to be had, and then a little paragraph about each of the speakers that were going to be at the conference, including the keynote speakers. So we had Alex Clark, Matthew Gay, and Bob Sears were the primary keynote speakers for this year. Also, a bunch of other presenters that, I had met last year when I went, and I got to meet again this year, as well as new presenters and new topics to present on. So lots of great sponsors. So there's a sponsor list here, and I may show some of that online, but all of these sponsors had tables and they were sharing things, products as well as information. So just like a really great time. I bought things and got a lot of free things from most of these places. I've met some of the owners of some of these places, both locally and nationally. And it's really nice. Lots of ads in here. You can get discounts on things because you attended, discount codes. So just like, some other conferences have that ability as well. But this was something that I've been looking forward to since last year, finally happened. And man, it was a great experience. This year I got to I went with a friend, and she had never been to anything like this. And I kind of teased her about how I kind of pulled her into this natural journey with me. I love it. But not everybody is into that, and that's okay. You don't have to be into the natural health world. But I want to provide you with the information because I think knowledge is power. And there were a lot of things that I didn't know. And then now that I know them, I can't not know those things. So it's when I go to grocery store and when I look at products, I can't not know the information that I know now. And so now I stop buying certain products. I stop using certain products because I know what those ingredients mean when I look at the ingredient list. So we had my first presentation, first keynote, the very first session on the first day was Matthew Gay. He is with Fit Church United, and he talked about the word for worship in Hebrew being shakah, and how many times it's used in the Bible. Well, not just the Bible, in the Old Testament, but its meaning and how we can use that word in our practice. And he encouraged all of us in the for the rest of the conference to really focus on being present and taking notes. But when we're taking notes, to take notes for what stands out and what you want to use that information for. And I did remember that. Now I was taking other notes too because I I need to hear things. I need to hear things a couple of times sometimes to really get it. And sometimes they were just talking so fast. They only had so much time to get information to us. So I was taking a lot of notes, but there were a lot of moments where I was, taking notes because that affects me, that affects my clients, that affects the work I am doing and the work that I want to do. So I know there are multiple sessions where I thought, ooh, I could do a presentation on something with this information that they're presenting. Ooh, I could see how that could work into something that I do. And when I talk to people about health and anxiety. So I was getting a lot of inspiration from a lot of these sessions. He talked about Christianity, and he talked about our role, not just, as Christians, but also as disciples, but in our health, that, we can do both. It doesn't have to be, if we're trying to be healthy, it doesn't have to be that we're worshiping, health, but that we are worshiping the body that we were given. So lots of really good stuff from him. And actually, it was a funny story. I went into the gym that morning at the hotel because I've been working on me. And I was doing my workout, and he came in. We came in about the same time, and I thought he looked familiar, but I didn't quite know who he was yet. I just had seen his picture in the advertisements. And then I was like, oh yeah, that for sure is him. And I talked to him about that later, and it was just funny. We were both in there. We were both like, don't be awkward, just do your workout, So it's just, a funny little interaction that you can have, and, funny how you can just meet people and, be experiencing some of the same things and not even know it. Talked about inflammation with Dr. Rachel Shuck, talking about gallbladders and, just removing organs. And she did that was one of the first questions she asked the group was, how many people know somebody who's had one of these, organs removed? And she named a few, like your gallbladder, your uterus, your, what's the other one? Appendix, there are some other, maybe there's another one or two, but how many of you have had those, know somebody who's had those organs removed? And a bunch of hands went up, myself included. I know several people who've had their gallbladder removed, and multiple family members who have their gallbladder removed. And the point being that, removing that organ, let's just say the gallbladder, is removing the pain point, but it's not removing the problem. Like that's the pain point is the symptom, but it's not the source of the problem. It's actually, I learned the gallbladder, which I kind of already knew, but the way that it was phrased, it really stuck with me is that, the gallbladder, when the gallbladder is having issues, it's really a liver problem because the liver then gets backed up and it pushes it down into the gallbladder, and then you have gallbladder issues. So we have to find the source of the problem. Now, sometimes it's too late, right? Sometimes, there's been enough damage that something maybe kind of has to be removed. But oftentimes, I think, not a doctor by any means, but from just hearing other stories and hearing other providers talk about healing and being in, chats where other people have talked about healing these problems where a doctor maybe told them, oh, that needs removed. And they went, pause, and they did something about it. Now, it wasn't, these types of healing aren't usually an immediate fix, right? If you have, a uterus with a bunch of, issues, there's a bunch of stuff that can happen because of your uterus. You're not going to be able to take a pill and fix it by your next period. It may be a year or two. It could be a long process to heal that problem. But there also could be the problem or the issue where there's been a buildup or enough of a problem where it either has to be removed or you have to have surgery to eradicate something or fix something. And then from there, you are working on fixing the source of the problem so that that thing doesn't continue. So we talked about glucose levels, and that, how your cortisol is related to releasing insulin. So if you have like high cortisol, it's going to have trouble releasing insulin. You know, this is all this whole session was about, it's called Inflammation Nation, Hidden Reasons You're Stuck in Pain. So that was really helpful in gathering more helpful tools and helpful facts, lots of books that I'm going to add to my list on books to read. Maybe I'll get to them this year. I did purchase several books this year. Sometimes I purchase books and they go on the TBR shelf. If you don't know what that is, the to be read shelf. So I did buy books last year and some of them got read, some of them didn't get read yet. So I have them, they're on my shelf. I do plan to read them. So maybe that's part of my goal this year is to actually make an effort to read those books. But I do have to mix in the fun books as well, because it can be really hard to just read sciencey, heavy books and not mix something fun in there as well. Learned a lot about NSAIDs. And that like they're supposed to be anti-inflammatory, but like they're not really anti-inflammatory long term, and they actually can be a huge cause of inflammation and leaky gut. So if you're on NSAIDs, those are things to, consider looking more into. I attended a session on raising resilient kids and how real food builds body, brain, and palate. And this was done by Chef James Barry. He is the owner and creator of Eat Pluck. And he was on Shark Tank. I didn't know that. I don't know if he was on Shark Tank between when I saw him last year and this year, or if he was on Shark Tank before all of that. I don't actually know when the Shark Tank happened compared to when I met him, but Eat Pluck is basically like a spice or a spice that is made with organ meat. And so he has different versions of the spice. Some is just the organ meat. Some is, and this all comes from cows because like helps like. So if you didn't know that, like helps like, but it also helps to build iron and other nutrients that we need in our body. And he has brain as well in some of those. So some are more expensive than others, depending on how hard it is to get those ingredients. And so I bought some this year to be able to incorporate into food. But he talked a lot about how, with kids who are picky eaters, he had an image of tongues, and I had to draw the picture. I also took a picture, but where the sweet is on the tip of our tongue, salty is kind of along the bottom line of our tongue, sour is on the sides of our tongue, bitter is in the back of our tongue, and umami, that's like that meaty sense of taste. That's like your whole front part of your tongue. But sweet and salty are the ones that picky eaters like the most. And there's texture and stuff involved in that too. So they don't really need help building those sensations and to those tastes, but they do need help building the others. And so it talked about like incorporating slowly the different foods into the food that they're eating. For example, like his spices, he did talk about that, but he talked about lots of other foods and ways to do that. And when you start to incorporate that, you just a little by little, he even talked about his own kids and how one of his kids who was there helping him, said, oh, I want to try that. And he was like, you have tried it. I've put it in your food already. And she didn't know, right? Because he was slowly building it into their lifestyle and into their food. I think he was the one, maybe somebody else had it, but this would fit. They showed an image of like our food. And I knew this, but I'm a visual person. So they showed an apple from, like the 1940s compared to the apple today. The apple from the 40s had, and I don't know the exact dates, so I'm not looking at it right now, but they were a lot more nutrient dense. So our foods, 100 years ago, 80 years ago, 50 years ago even, were a lot more nutrient dense than they are today. So today it would take, 20 apples to have the same nutrients that we get in that single apple from, 80 years ago. And that's why like you could be eating healthy and eating all the right things and maybe still not getting the nutrients you need because our food is very depleted. So it matters where you're getting your food from. Are you getting them from local farmers? Are you growing it yourself? Have you built up your soil? I know for me personally, I have several different gardens in my yard, and we had one where it was a certain like length and width, and then at some point we extended it, and so we needed more dirt. So the part where we extended it to, we just got some dirt. I don't know where my husband got it from, but it was like hard and thick, and it wasn't like it wasn't topsoil. It wasn't easily turnable. It didn't have compost in it. So like anything I planted in it didn't really grow very well. Some things did. And over the last couple of years, right, that soil has loosened up more and more because I planted stuff in it. I put leaves on it. I did stuff to help compost the soil and to help it grow and get nutrients in it and get worms and bugs and things in it that the soil needs. But that's not our soil here in the United States. So there was a lot of talk about that. I attended some different panels. There was a women's health panel, talked about, I asked about breast health and mammograms compared to thermography, compared to ultrasound. And the general rule of thumb for natural providers is to avoid mammograms if possible, and that those are more they use them for screening, even though those should be, maybe per the doctors that were speaking in this panel, should be more used for diagnosis versus a screening tool where you can use the thermography or ultrasound, which would be a healthier, safer choice. And then, you can go into those more invasive choices, but they all have different types of consequences and different pros and cons. And they did talk about those things when I asked that question, and I'm not going to get into all of that. They talked about, getting screenings for different things, doing different tests, different labs to find out what's really going on inside of you, and not, that generalized care. We want specific care. We went to a presentation by Dr. Allie Miller, talked about the anti-anxiety diet. She had a book on that, talked a lot about, she had the 6 R's: remove inflammatory food, reset the gut microbiome, repair the gut lining, restore the micronutrients, your micronutrient status, rebound the adrenals, and rebalance neurotransmitters. And she talked through each of those steps, but like all of those things are super helpful. And then she had a book that talked about how you can do that and what types of food you can eat. And she had different recipes and things you could get in that book. Now, I didn't purchase that book, but it is on my list as a possible in the future. But it may be so helpful for one of you out there if you're listening and you have anxiety, or you know somebody that has a lot of anxiety. Talks about those 6 R's, those 6 pillars, to help maybe transform some of what you're feeling, because it's not just the events that are causing or leading to our anxiety. It's all of the things that are going on and happening like inside our body that could be driving that anxiety. That makes sense. I went to a presentation on holistic cancer support, and how our diet plays a lot a part in that, and different labs that you can get. There was a session by Dr. Bob Sears. That was really good. I've met Dr. Sears before, at least once, maybe more than once. So that was nice to get to see him again, and he signed my books. So that was great. I love getting signed books from, any books that I have. So I actually have a decent amount of signed books, and I just think it's something cool to have. We went to a session on From the Soil to the Soul. That was Dr. Tabitha Barker talking about, in the Bible, like, we are made from dust, and so we're made from elements in the soil, and we have our major elements, minor elements, trace elements, and shared organisms that are all part of, like, the earth, that are also part of us, and we need those things to survive and to thrive. She talked about serotonin and how tryptophan-rich foods turn into tryptophan and amino acids, which then are transferred into that 5-HTP, which is then turned into our serotonin. So if we're not getting those tryptophan-rich foods, then down the road, we're not getting the serotonin we need. But if our gut is all messed up, we're also not going to be able to translate all of those things into the serotonin that we need and all the other neurotransmitters that make us feel good. Talked about internal and external stressors and the cortisol cascade and the HPA axis dysfunction and stress, and how stress causes hormone chaos, and stress causes gut damage, and the consequences of leaky gut, and so many really great things that I want to incorporate Talked about epigenetics and how we're not a victim of our genes. So often people think whether it's breast cancer, or autism, or ADHD, or fill in the blank, some other issue that you may have that other family members, people in your family have had. Just because they've had it doesn't mean that you are going to have it. Now you can get tested for genes. So often people, when it comes to breast cancer, ovarian cancer, can get tested for the BRCA gene. And if you are positive for the BRCA gene, famously, was it Angelina Jolie, I think, had mastectomies to kind of counteract or prevent that from happening. But what this is about is that just because you have a gene doesn't mean that you will experience the expression of that gene. And there's another good book called Dirty Genes by nope, I think his name is Ben as well. Lynch, Dr. Ben Lynch. He wrote that book, and he talks about genes, and some of that were talked in here by Dr. Edwards, and how you can turn your genes on and off based on your environment, the things that you eat, the chemicals you're exposed to, the products that you use, and each gene is affected in a different way. The Dirty Genes book talks a lot about that, and so just because you have the BRCA gene doesn't mean that it's turned on. But if it is turned on, what can you do to turn it off? He did mention something in here. I don't remember where it was, but you can have a part of a gene that the expression part is turned on and the suppression part is turned off, which would then be kind of like a disaster waiting to happen. And so you want those to be flipped in whatever that gene would be, right? You want the suppression of something bad, the cancer gene, to be turned on, and you want the other part of that gene to be turned off. And so getting genetic testing and finding that information out would be able to help you understand what you need to do to change that. It is possible to change those things. He talked about there was an image where he showed the minerals in our soil going down, and then the other part of the image showed red lines. So blue lines showed the minerals starting up here, starting up high and then going down over time. And there was a red line that showed diseases that started out low and then spiked and went up over time. So they crisscrossed, and they kind of crisscrossed. And what does that mean, right? When we have low minerals in our soil and low minerals in our food, our health goes down. I went to a presentation on metabolic blueprint, rebuilding resilience after experiencing mold, Lyme, and other mysterious illnesses. That was by Dr. Eric Rischlag. And just how you can be tested for different things and still not find the answer. And you could be treated for one thing, but you're really still not looking at the root cause and where those things are coming from. And so it could still be something else when we're not digging deep enough. He talked a lot about that in his presentation. I went to another doctor panel where people are just asking questions. And so I was just listening, heard lots of different things about GAPS diets and, basically healing as a couple, and if you're dealing with some kind of infection, whether that can be passed between couples. Something to note, that is something that can happen. I didn't know that. So just like an STD can be passed, your bad bacteria and things like that can be passed from couple to couple, parent to child. Under different circumstances. So, that's not just oh, I kissed you or I touched you. We're now infected. That's not what I'm saying. But it sounds like, if you're intimate or if there's certain things going on, being aware of each other and what those difficulties are, you may need to work on things so you're not constantly passing those things back and forth and you're healing together versus separately. lots of good information there. I went to one, the one I really took a lot away from, and I really want to hear it again, was it natural dentistry and the role it plays in reducing chronic diseases. And he started his presentation off talking about like mouth breathers versus nasal breathers and just the things that happen physiologically with your body when you breathe through your mouth versus breathing through your nose. We're supposed to breathe through our nose. So if you are in a relaxed state, if you aren't breathing through your nose, right? Like your tongue, your jaw should close in a certain way. Your tongue should sit on the roof of your mouth, and breathing in then opens up that airway. But when we don't, it causes us to not breathe as deep, not deep into our lungs. And then we hunch forward and our neck moves forward, which then causes your tongue to sit in a certain way, which then causes, forces you to open with breathe with your mouth open because you're not getting enough opening in your airway. So there's like this domino effect. And then because you do that, there can be other health effects because of all of those things happening, because you're not getting oxygen, because your mouth isn't sitting the way it should, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It was fascinating. But definitely led me walking away saying, I need to check some things in my family, in my household, things that I've been, noticing. And now I have even, a better understanding of what those things can mean. You talked about the teeth and some things I know, root canals versus cavities and how those things form and, what happens in your mouth when you have a root canal. It's basically like leaving something dead in your body. Would you want to leave a dead organ in your body? What do you think would happen if you left a dead organ in your body? Same thing that happens with leaving a dead tooth in your body. It causes health problems. So if you are somebody that has a root canal and you have health problems, you may consider getting your jaw looked at because it can cause infection up in those like the oral cavities up where your teeth are because of all of the blood vessels that go to those teeth and where they lead to. And some fascinating information on like how each tooth in your body is connected to different areas, systems in your body. And so if you have an issue with a certain tooth, it may be connected to certain issues you're experiencing elsewhere in your body and what, that could mean for your health. So much fascinating information. Another one on kind of mold and toxins and stress. And that was by Dr. Diana Stafford, and being able to detect mold and test for it and how to find it and how to treat it, remove, replace, re-inoculate, repair, and, things like that. So those were all the notes I think that I took here, but so much information taken away. I'm going to have the opportunity to be able to like review and watch those sessions again. So here, hopefully in the next month or so, I'll be able to get access to those. I'll be able to watch them again, talk about, relearn and rehear those things for me, just like I'm sure my clients, like hearing things multiple times really allows it to sink in and settle. And then you're able to do something with that information versus just hearing it once. So even just me talking to you about it is helping me to retain. I tell that to my clients, you learn a coping skill or you learn something, go teach somebody else so that you start to retain that and you do better with that information as well. So, fascinating conference, just amazing to be around like-minded people and to learn all of this great information and meet so many wonderful people. I did bring this bottle and, I did purchase this one, but fun fact, part of the conference is to like meet each of the vendors and once you do, you get a little slip to like, a raffle ticket of sorts, and they had some large prizes and you could pick which one you wanted to be raffle for, and I put mine in to win one of 5 Boro water filters. I currently have a Berkey, which is a very similar product to the Boro, at home, and so I put it in because there were 5 chances to win, and I won one. So my plan tentatively is to potentially have that water filter here in my office instead of using bottled water. So yeah, that means being able to use cups and things like that in the office instead. But then I bought one of their nice glass water bottles, and that's why it's sitting here. And it's just healthy glass instead of using plastic or metal. I bought this and it has this cool little filter in it. So if I wanted to put fruit or herbs or something in here, I could still drink it and it would float around in here, and the little filter at the top would prevent it from coming out. So I got a nice water filter that filters out all the chemicals in your water and the fluoride in the water. And I just love my Berkey filter at home, and I'm excited to potentially have that here in the office if I can find a good place for it, because you'd be surprised how many chemicals are in your water. And once you start using it regularly, you probably won't be able to go back. I know I used to drink tap water and I loved certain places tap water, and other places I was like, oh, I don't like this. Well, now I can't drink any tap water because I can taste the chlorine. I can smell the chlorine, and I don't like it. So I brought this to share. I have so many other things I could share. I will probably do those in some smaller videos. And I didn't bring a lot of those here to my recording studio today. Maybe I'll do that here in the weeks to come, but I hope you learned something from some of the facts that I'm sharing with you today. Thank you for joining me today. I had a great time resharing my experience, and maybe you will want to go to the Seeking Whole Health Conference next year in Wooster, Ohio. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you again next week.